Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we're going over some things that I wish I knew before I sunk over 100 hours into Borderlands 4. These are going to be covering like general tips, settings, things to look out for, how the different difficulties work, and more. Borderlands 4 is very familiar if you've played Borderlands games, but there's a ton of new things in the new like open world setting and with the new changes to like manufacturers and all that. So I wanted to break down some things for y'all. Hope you guys enjoy the breakdown, and let's get right into it. So when you're first starting out, you're gonna get the option of picking a difficulty for your playthrough. You can change these later on. Easy means that elemental affinities matter less and you take less damage. Normal is balanced, and hard is you take more damage but you get more cash, you get better loot, and elemental affinities matter more. Now, what I wanted to explain is what this elemental affinities matter more, because it just wasn't clear from this at all. So this is the elemental affinities chart. This might look like a lot. I'll explain it pretty quickly. So this is the elemental affinities chart. This might look like a lot of information. It's pretty simple once you get the hang of it. But basically, the different elements deal different amounts of damage on the different difficulties. And on the hardest difficulty, you actually deal more damage with the correct element, but you're penalized harder for using the incorrect element. So, for example, Incendiary is good against flesh, Shock is good against shield, and Corrosive is good against armor, with Cryo being good against armor but not quite as good as Corrosive, and Radiation being good against shield but not quite as good as Shock. Now, the way that this works is on the easiest difficulty, if you're using like fire damage on flesh, you get 20% increased damage. However, if you're on the hardest difficulty, you deal 75% increased damage. So you get a huge benefit from using matching elements. However, on the hardest difficulty, if you're using fire on shields, you're going to deal 50% less damage. However, on easy, you only lose 10% of your damage. So basically, on the difficulties, if you're going to play them, if you're playing on hard, you really want to try to get elements of different elemental weapons, so that when you come against enemies that are using different elemental bars, you can match the weapon types and take them out quickly. You are severely penalized on the hardest difficulty for using like fire on armor or fire on shield. The next thing to mention has to do with some settings. There's a lot of settings that you can turn on. I personally, in terms of my like graphics and stuff, played with DLSS on performance with frame gen on. That bumped my frame rates from like 70 to about 160 FPS, turning on both DLSS and frame gen. Some other settings for performance to mess around with is your HLOD loading range. This sets how far your hierarchical level of detail are rendered. If you turn this down, you may notice better performance. Some other ones to mess around with that help a lot is your texture streaming speed. This was defaulted on very high, and I was like hitching a lot, traveling to new areas. This helps a bit with like when you're traveling to new areas or on your vehicle, how fast the texture stream in while you're moving can help performance while like traveling around. Some other things to mess around with are volumetric fog and cloud. Turning these to low definitely seems to help performance. And then a really big one is your reflections quality. This game seems to have lumen or ray tracing, but it's not really its own setting. It seems to be hidden in this reflections quality. So if you are having some performance issues, try turning your reflections quality all the way down to low. It definitely helped me. And then personally, I just turned motion blur down to 0. In terms of like actual controls, there's a few things that you can change in here. The first that is really, really nice is if you want it, you can turn on basically aim assist on mouse and keyboard. It's by default on controller. It is not on by default on mouse and keyboard. It just makes your aim very, very snappy. Feels good to use, like snipers, for example. The other thing that's really, really nice to turn on in here is the toggle radar display. This is just a must. By default, the game comes with a compass on, which makes it really hard to like know where enemies are, because on the compass you can't tell how far away enemies are. That you can just tell where they are in relationship in terms of like to the left or right of you. The radar gives you actual readouts on if an enemy is close to your right or far away to your right. I think this is an absolute must turn on setting. And the last thing that I think is an absolute must to turn on in settings is go to accessibility and then go to gameplay and come down to grapple view tilt and turn it to off. This is enabled by default. What this does is whenever you're grappling to a point, it'll automatically force your camera to look at the point while you're grappling, which makes it feel really awkward. With it turned off, you can like grapple to a point and then start shooting an enemy while you're flying through the air, or start immediately looking to your next grapple point, so that you can kind of chain grapples together. If you have this on, it basically locks your camera during the grapple animation, which just feels terrible. The next thing to mention is these like little respawn stations. Now, if you've played Borderlands before, these kind of look like fast travels, and I kind of assumed that they were my first time playing. They'll pop up on the map and give you a checkpoint. However, you cannot actually fast travel to these. In order to fast travel around the map, you're going to need something called Safehouses. Now, these won't reveal until you get close to them, but Safehouses are your primary way to like save an area of the map that you've traveled to without having to go all the way back there. A mistake that I kept making when I was starting out is I would drive past those, assume that I could have like travel back to them, and then I'd leave an area and then want to come back and have to drive all the way there. For example, there's like massive regions that you can travel to, and sometimes if you don't grab a safe house and you want to come back to that region, you'll have to drive all the way back. Now, these safe houses you can find around the map, and unlocking them is really important. Not only will they give you SDU tokens, which we'll talk about in a second, but they offer these things called bounty boards. Now, these bounty boards will have different objectives. There's usually an acquire, a collect, and a bounty. The acquire and collect, I personally don't really bother with. You can give them a go if you want. A lot of the times they make you go do something and bring it back to the safe house, which takes forever because you have to carry it on foot. However, the bounties offer you really, really fast XP gains. And anytime you complete a bounty, you'll get a like loot chest that can sometimes reward really, really good gear. So anytime I'm traveling through, I'll always make sure to grab a bounty. It'll help you stay on level while you're playing through the game. And unlocking these safe houses, I think, is very important. The next thing to talk about is vehicle customization. Now, I didn't realize this was even a thing until much later on, but if you go into your customization tab, you can actually tab over to your vehicle. Now, in your vehicle, you can pick a bunch of different options for which like look of your vehicle you're going to do, but the thing that really matters is your hover drive. Now, these from different manufacturers offer different stats. So, for example, my like Malawan drive has a whole lot more speed than my Jacobs drive, but my Jacobs offers me a lot more acceleration. You are going to be in your vehicle a whole lot. So while this doesn't look like it matters at first, it's very nice to have a speedy vehicle to get around the map quicker. Now, how do you even unlock these in the first place? These are actually unlocked based off of your allegiance with different manufacturers. So if you go into your missions, you can see your challenges. And for example, just by killing enemies with Vladoff gear, I'm going to get Vladoff rewards. And one of those Vladoff rewards is like Vladoff hover drives, or if I'm using Malawan, I can get Malawan hover drives. And so if you see a hover drive that you really like, maybe it offers the most amount of boost, maybe you can use those weapons every once in a while, even if you don't like them, so that you can get the best drive for your vehicle. The next thing to mention has to do with inventory management that I wish I'd started using earlier. Basically, if you did not know, if you're out farming a boss and you get a bunch of cool loot, but you run out of backpack space and can't pick up anything more, you can actually send things to your bank from out and about. So I just marked that for my bank. Let's say I'm just like out farming a boss. From anywhere in the world, you can just send items to the bank. So let's say you find a really good class mod or weapon for another one of your characters, and you don't want to be lugging it around, you don't want to travel back, you can just send all of those items to your bank from out in the world, which is really, really nice, really, really convenient. The other thing with that is marking items as favorites or tagging them in a group. If you ever are going to sell an item and it's marked as a favorite, or even drop it or put it away or anything, it'll always ask you, are you sure you want to do this? This item is favorited or this item is equipped, which is really nice. You can also mark items with different tags. So for example, if I was using this on a bleed build, I could use the tag group 1 to mark everything for my bleed build, and use tag group 2 to mark everything for my minion build. And then I could simply go into my backpack and sort by group tag 1 or group tag 2 to quickly equip all of the gear that I want for a specific build. My next tip is if you're ever struggling in damage or you want to kill a boss quickly, keep an eye out for underbarrel launchers. This is regardless of what class you are. Underbarrel launchers offer some of the highest damage in the game. So for example, This is a Jacobs Dullahan shotgun that does 740 times 6 damage per shot. However, it has an alt fire or underbarrel that does 15,000 damage times 5. So a metric ton more damage than my shotgun shot. And these are on their own cooldown. You can only shoot it once, but it's such a burst of damage that if you're ever struggling in keeping up with damage or you want to farm a boss quickly, these can solve a lot of your issues. Some of the strongest ones, I'll probably have a separate video on this, but some of the strongest ones to call out are the Dullahan, which can roll with the spread launcher. Vladov SMGs can roll with the alt fire taser, which is really, really nice. And Mallowan shotguns that can roll with beam tosser. These launch 3 projectiles that can deal 12,000 damage each. And they pierce enemies, so they can hit multiple. Really, really strong. The last one to call out is the knives. I don't have one on me right now, but some Jacobs weapons could roll with a knife launcher that shoots a 1 projectile of a knife, and it does thousands of damage. But yeah, it's just something to keep an eye out for. Maybe they don't work in your build, or maybe they're not useful for you for the setup that you want to go for, but you can just use them every 20 seconds for a quick burst of damage, and then go back to the normal build that you're playing. The next thing to mention is survivability in Borderlands 4, and a lot of your survivability, at least through the campaign, is going to be relying on rep kits. Now, rep kits are these new stims that you can inject into yourself for a quick burst of healing. However, they offer a bunch of different benefits, and finding a good one can make a massive difference in a playthrough, especially knowing what to look out for on them. So, for example, if we look at this caffeinated recuperator, this has 3 different stats on its top line. It's going to give us a total of 6,151 healing, but 3,000 of that initial healing is going to be, or 3,000 of that is initial healing, and then the other 3,000 is 3,000 over 8 seconds. Now, not every rep kit has this. So, for example, this rep kit is only 621 healing. It's an insta-heal, but it does no heal over time. Now, some things to keep an eye out for, depending on your build, but just in general, order rep kits will always roll with 2 charges, which is really, really nice. So you can still get these bonuses and keep them up more often on your rep kit. Early on, it's really hard to get action skill cooldown rate, especially on certain characters like Amon, and you can find the accelerator roll, which on use grants you 100% action skill cooldown rate for 8 seconds. This makes a massive difference if you're playing an action skill build. Super, super nice. And the other one to mention is Leech. Leech grants you 30% lifesteal for a while. So not only are you going to get the healing from your rep kit, but you can also get more passive healing. This really helps sometimes when you use a rep kit. You heal yourself, but enemies are shooting at you, and so you just lose all that health, and then you've got a rep kit on cooldown. Leech will help you sustain quite a bit. The way that Leech works in this game is very different than how it's worked in previous games. It's not based on damage dealt. It is basically, if I have 30% Leech or 30% lifesteal, when I do damage to an enemy, I will heal for 30% of my health over time. It's not based on how much damage I deal. It's just if I'm proccing damage on an enemy, that'll proc a heal of 30% of my life over 5 seconds. So it's not like you're going to shoot once and you're going to get back to full health, but it will help you passively regenerate a lot more health. For those of you that have played a Borderlands game before, you might already know this, but it's really, really helpful to know. And that is when you pick up a class mod and you equip it, you do not need to be spec'd into the points that class mod puts points into to benefit from it. So, for example, this class mod is giving me points into Meltdown, which Harlow's critical hits with guns deal bonus radiation damage. Just by equipping this class mod, I get these points. I don't need to spec points into this tree at all, and I can get a massive benefit of getting this big bonus radiation damage on my crits. If there's certain things in a tree that you really like, but you don't want to spec into them, you want to spec into a different tree, you can find important skills for your build that you can get on a class mod, which allows you to not spec into that tree or not spec those nodes and still benefit from them. It really opens up your build and makes for some crazy possibilities. Our very last thing to mention has to do with the Echo 4 rewards. Now, you can get rewards for doing tons of different things: story quests, side quests, world activities, challenges. Basically anything will reward you with one of these reward chests, and they can give you legendaries. And one thing to note about these is they do not scale with your level. So if you get a reward and you're level 5 and you want to save it because you've got good weapons and you want to get to level 10 before you open it because you could get a legendary, that legendary will drop at level 5. It will drop at the level that the item was rewarded to you. So there is no point in like waiting or saving them. If you get a lot of these stored up, there's an open all rewards button, which will open all of them up at a time. So you don't have to like individually go through the animation of the chest opening. And the other thing that's really nice is if you get something and you don't care about it, you can actually just mark it for junk and from that screen, so you don't get a bunch of random stuff in your inventory that you don't know where it came from, and it's just clogging up space. So you can just mark those for junk, and anytime that you mark anything for junk, you can instantly sell them at a vending machine. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I wish you the best in your journey into Borderlands 4. I will catch y'all in the next one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and hey, maybe even subscribe. We're getting really close to 500,000 subs. I'll catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.